Now here's a discussion we didn't think we'd ever get to have again on the Autosport YouTube channel. And in fact, we weren't doing these videos the last time this was relevant. But we're here to talk about a Kimi Raikkonen Formula 1 victory. The first one in 5.5 years. I've got Stuart Codling and Ben Anderson here with me to discuss it. Ben, you've switched from the hot seat after filling in for me while I was away and spreading fake news about me being on Fernando Alonso's deck chair. I was not on a beach, I can assure you of that. But this was a great drive from Raikkonen. This wasn't a race that just fell into Raikkonen's lap. You know, he had to work for it. It was a real battle with initially Lewis Hamilton and then with Max Verstappen. He was under pressure a lot of times during the race, and there were several key moments that he had to deliver, and he did just that. So this is a proper Raikkonen win, isn't it? Yeah,
a great drive by Raikkonen, probably his best in his second Ferrari career. I think it's the first time since 2013 he's also had 10 out of 10 in Autosport's driver ratings. Certainly I never gave him a 10 when I was doing them.
Well, you just had the Ferrari era, I think.
Yes, I did, yeah, the otherwise woeful Ferrari era.
Is it the first time in the Gregorian calendar that he's had a 10 out of 10 in the Autosport driver ratings?
It's certainly a very long time. I think
Let us know down below.
But yeah, a very accomplished performance. He nailed the start, that was key, making the most of being on the ultra soft tyres compared to Hamilton's super softs. Controlled the first stint, had to resist some pretty hefty pressure from Hamilton, drove some clever defensive lines, dummied him into the pits on the virtual safety car to end the first stint. And then a tyre management masterclass really after that. That's something that Kimi normally is really adept at. The Ferrari setup seemed to work quite well, and Mercedes, in conjunction with that, didn't seem to be quite as on the ball as they have been in recent races. Maybe the lack of practice running hurt their setup, and Hamilton struggled to look after the rear tyres, certainly on the harder compound. But that said, you know, Sebastian Vettel wasn't in the mix in this race. He had another disaster, and Toto Wolff felt that really, if he had a normal race, he would have been in the mix there. And Max Verstappen, he started 18th on the grid and he finished less than 2 seconds behind. So it wasn't as if Raikkonen went out and dominated the race, but you can't fault his performance.
Collins, we're used to Raikkonen showing all this promise during a race weekend, but there's always somewhere it will go wrong along the line, whether that is in qualifying, whether it is messing up the start, whether it's going to sleep for a few laps around the pit stops or whatever. But this time there wasn't any of that, was there? It was Raikkonen of old in many respects.
Yeah, there's not really any coulda, woulda, shoulda about this Grand Prix weekend at all. And as you say, there's been so many weekends, particularly in the second Ferrari era, where he's flattered to deceive. He's either been nearly but not quite as quick as his teammate, or he's been quicker at certain points but not at the right moment. And I'm sure all the people who comment below the line would be able to churn out reams and reams of races he could have won for Ferrari if only such and such, you know, Monaco 2017, that sort of thing. The fact is he didn't win, and Kimi wins are very, very rare, particularly over the past 10 years. So it is surprising, and he drove a blinding good race off the back of what was clearly a suboptimal strategy. He had the softest possible tyre at the start of the race. We saw other people have difficulty making the soft tyres last. So on paper,
even with 2 stops, yeah, he only did 1.
Yeah, so on paper, he really should not have been where he was. So not only to take track position off Lewis Hamilton at the start, which he needed to, and let's face it, for 37 races before then, he had not moved forward in any Grand Prix start. He'd always gone backwards or stayed neutral.
Do you think Kimi was actually in the car? Do you think that he was replaced with some other driver that Ferrari constructed? A Kimi clone,
a doppelganger.
If it's so out of character that he was able to produce this flawless
That would explain why Charles Leclerc's race didn't last very long, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Maybe after Martin Brundle had finished interviewing him, he pulled his face off, sort of like in a Mission Impossible or Scooby-Doo style, and said, if it wasn't for you meddling kids, I'd have succeeded. Oh, I did succeed.
I think there's an important point, though, in that Kimi seems to have been driving better since the news was communicated that he wouldn't be staying on at Ferrari. The Monza weekend onwards, he's been Ferrari's best driver. He had pole there. Arguably, he should have won that race. He's won in Austin, and he's outscored Vettel in that time as well. So it seems that we've seen it before with Kimi. When he's mentally free, if there's some doubt or uncertainty hanging over him, and you take that away for good or ill, he seems to perform much better. And it seems like we're seeing that phenomenon again.
He's kept a clear head when everyone around him has been losing theirs. You think of that radio message when Hamilton was coming up behind him, and he said, let's not do anything stupid. And I don't think he was talking about himself. I think he was telling the team to, don't panic, I've got this under control, leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. And that was another great phase of the race for him, where he kept Hamilton behind him for 3 crucial laps, which put Hamilton at a disadvantage later on in the race, cost him time and track position.
Well, that was one of those great moments, wasn't it, where it didn't really become clear how important that phase and that little battle was. It looked like a guy on ageing tyres really fighting for no reason with somebody who was going to come past him inevitably anyway, but it proved key in the gap later on in the race. We talked about everything that Kimi did so well during the race, but is that one of the reasons that some of his critics find him so frustrating? Part of the reason he does come under fire, I think, is because people know that these kind of performances are in there, and Kimi, to his credit, is very good at putting his hands up and admitting when he makes the mistakes. The real shame is that there have been too many of those mistakes over the last few years.
He's too good to be a compliant number 2, which is, it seems that he took his role at Ferrari to almost be a compliant number 2. He doesn't seem to want any bother or hassle, and he does thrive in a no-stress environment. But it's been such a long time since we've seen a really fiery performance from him. You think I'd say probably his greatest Formula 1 Grand Prix of all time, maybe Suzuka 2005, 17th to 1st. Just driving around the outside of Fisichella on the last lap to nail the victory when most other people wouldn't take the risk and would settle for second, rather than kind of this guy who you almost forget he's there at times recently, which is such a shame. And I wonder if that was what Ferrari were thinking when they decided to put Leclerc in next to Vettel next year rather than keeping Raikkonen, because they kind of think, actually, Vettel's cracking under pressure. We need someone who's going to put him, keep him on his toes, so that if we decide to give him the flick, we have a number 1 driver. And they probably don't think that Kimi is that driver.
I think if Vettel was performing at his best, which he hasn't been since he won at Spa really, then Raikkonen doesn't win that race. He doesn't normally get a look in when Vettel's performing at his best, but he just isn't at the moment. So Raikkonen, who's been more consistent, is now coming to the fore. But we see a pattern, I think, in this second Ferrari era, as you put it, of Raikkonen taking a bit too long to get going in the season. He has become Ferrari's de facto number 2, not by contract, but by the design of not scoring enough points, not putting himself into title contention. And by the time he builds his own momentum and starts scoring the strong results, remember the second half of 15, I think he was quite strong, or second half of 16, he outscored Vettel. It's too late, and he's only then going to be able to pick off the odd good result like he did on Sunday. For Kimi to have more of a chance to do more, he needs to be at it from the word go, and he just hasn't been in the last few seasons. Is
this the key point then? Because the obvious question, when Raikkonen wins, he's only got 3 more races now for Ferrari, but when you win this late in the season, before you're getting booted out by the team effectively to make way for the next big thing in Leclerc, it does raise the question of, is he being moved on too soon? But is it simply a case of Ferrari have got so much, a wealth of evidence now to suggest that they've made the right decision, that one victory and finally stringing it all together isn't enough to reverse such a decision?
Well, one swallow doesn't make a summer, does it?
No.
And this is one swallow. Kimi, if he'd produced 4, 5, 6 of these performances through the season and had a number of wins, was in title contention, then you'd say, well, absolutely, it's the wrong decision. But at the moment, he is Ferrari's best driver, but that's only because Vettel is underperforming, continually making mistakes. If Vettel can get back to his best, and the evidence we've seen and Ferrari will have seen over the time they've been together, more often than not, Vettel is the faster driver, the more complete driver, the one who bags the big results. So Vettel at his best with Leclerc alongside is a better overall partnership than Kimi and Leclerc would be at their best.
If you're a team that has aspirations of winning the World Championship, constructors and drivers, ideally you want a driver who wins races more often than Depeche Mode release albums.